Welcome to the Kingdom Podcast, featuring Commissioner Christine King, where all voices are heard.
Welcome to the Kingdom Podcast, where all voices are heard. I am your host, Christine King, Chairwoman of the City of Miami Commission and Commissioner for District 5. We are located here at the Historic Overtown Lyric Theater, and today I am joined by Dr. Dorothy Fields, who is the founder of the Black Archives. Welcome to the Kingdom Podcast. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, and welcome to the Black Archives Historic Lyric Theater.
It is a wonderful place to host my podcast. People are allowed to listen to the podcast, but they can also view the podcast. And I love this space so much, and I promote it every chance I get. That's why I use it as the location for my podcast. And I know that I'm sitting here thanks in part to your efforts, and I want you to tell all of our listeners and viewers about what it is that you created founding the Black Archives and where we are today.
Well, we're certainly happy to have you, and the City of Miami has done a lot to help us to restore and maintain the theater. Know that I was a school librarian in 1974 preparing for the bicentennial, and I was a school librarian at an all-white school in Opelika. And I started very early looking for books about blacks because I wanted the bicentennial to include the local black community, because I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and did not have a lot of help at home. My then husband was in law school at the University of Miami.
Okay.
And and so it was my Saturday to keep the children, and so I decided to call the downtown library to ask them to pull 15 or 20 books for me about local blacks. The person who answered put me on hold, came back after what seemed like an enormous length of time, and said, we have no books. We only have a folder with obituaries about black people. And I was stunned. And once I composed myself, I asked why. And the answer they gave me changed my life and the life of the entire community as it relates to black history. And the answer was, I guess those people haven't thought enough of themselves to write their history.
Ouch.
That's what was said. 1974.
Wow.
Yes. And it was from those words, this where we are sitting now, the Lyric Theater, the Black Archives, the Historic Overtown Folklife Village, the Black History curriculum for Dade County Public Schools, all came from that response. Wow. I was motivated.
That was some motivation.
Yes.
Hearing you say, it just sounds ridiculous that in 1974 you could be told such a thing from the public library.
Yes, from the public library. And so once I composed myself and I said, she said, well, why don't you call the Historical Museum? They will have something. They will probably have something. And I said, what is that? She said, well, that's where all the 4th graders go to learn about history, Miami's history. And I said, well, I was at Phyllis Wheatley in Overtown, and we didn't go there. And there was silence. And so I got the number for the Historical Museum of Southern Florida, which you now know as History Miami.
Oh.
And they were very welcoming. It was Dr. Thelma Peters who answered, said that she had been a teacher at Edison for 30 years, retired, and gone to University of Florida to get to earn a PhD in history. And from there, she had come back, and that she was working on writing a book about Lemon City, now known as Little Haiti.
Uh-huh.
And that her colleague and friend, Arva Moore Parks McCabe, was writing a book about Coconut Grove, and that both of them had gotten information and some pictures about blacks, but that no one seemed interested beyond that. So I was hearing it for the second time in one day. And I said immediately, well, I'm interested.
Thank God for you.
Yes. And from there, I was able to get myself reassigned through the American Association of University Women, and Ruth Braddock and Edna DeVoe. The school system reassigned me for only 2 years. And in those 2 years, I was to help write a book on women, which we did write, called Julia's Daughters. I hope you've seen it. I hope you have a copy of it.
I do not, but I'm going to get a copy of it.
Julia's Daughters, Women in Dade County, from the Tequesta Indian women to the 1976. Oh. Yes, and they said that I would have to write a book. This was to be my book was to be the first book about blacks in Miami and Miami-Dade County, and that was 1974.
Amazing.
Instead of writing one book, I created a repository, an archive, so that many books could be written to collect materials, photographs and documents, maps, oral histories, all that I could for the future generation.
And we certainly are the beneficiaries of that.
Yes.
Because you could just come here, and this being here gives you a sense of self, just being in this space. The lobby today is beautiful with art, and just knowing that we could come, the wonderful things that the Black Archives does, like the huge Purvis Young pieces.
Yes.
That you have here. It's so beautiful that you catalog, and everything that you store for future generations. And that's so important. I don't know now if we take that for granted because we know that it's here, it's available, but I know myself personally, and as the elected for District 5, I am intentional about making sure that the Black Archives continues for years and years and years. You know, I understand it's not a money-making entity, but I understand the value of making sure that we are able to continue to tell our story, and people are able to look back and look forward, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Well, we're excited about that and happy to have you here. It was Timothy Barber when we were moving from the Caleb Center. Mm-hmm. Actually, I started my collection at History Miami. Mm-hmm. That's where the school system assigned me. And from History Miami, which then was across the street from Vizcaya, in the same building as the Museum of Science.
Right.
In the South. Yes. And so I moved the collection from there to the Caleb Center. And from the Caleb Center, once we got the money, the bond money from the county, we were able to move here. It was Timothy Barber, who was our executive director at the time, who in fact brokered the deal so that we would have the city, your office here. I had hoped originally to have housing on the 3rd floor, but I was told that that would have it was too complicated, and that it would not. But I knew that we needed to have a tenant,
yes,
so that we could always operate, and that we could always provide the materials. We provide the materials for the content, for books, for all platforms, for books and interviews, for AI now that's coming on.
Yes.
Very important.
Yes.
That the information from the people themselves, before other people start interpreting our history.
Right, right.
And so this year I have been named a fellow at the University of Miami, the Center for Global Black Studies.
Congratulations.
Thank you. To really look into the scholarship of archives, to look into the scholarship of the community participating in archives, and working with students and independent researchers, as well as emerging scholars. You will be participating, as I will be tomorrow, with Profiles in Black, a 3-person group of independent researchers, Keith Moore, Anne Marie Henry, and Christine Malcolm, who on their own, starting as volunteers, began using research that ultimately came from the things that I had collected over time, and from Dr. Dunn's book. I started, once I got the archives started, and I started it because I did go to Emory University, and I got certification in archives administration, came back and incorporated the Black Archives. And one of the things that my family told me, because I always heard family stories from a little girl, I never understood. I had cousins who listened too, but they didn't remember them the way I did. The stories that I was told helped me to create the archives. One of my uncles said to me that as a child growing up, he remembered walking by this space that Mr. Jeter Walker was building a theater. My mother's family from the Bahamas came here in 1903.
Oh, wow.
And lived right 2 blocks north of where we are now. It's where my mother was born.
Oh.
And so my uncle, who later became the Dr. S.H. Johnson, board certified and built a clinic, which still exists, said that as a boy, he would walk around this area and he would see some of the black men, many of them retired, some of them may have been in the Civil War, just sitting around boasting they helped Miami become a city. So once I was assigned by the school board to History Miami, I started looking for the charter. We were thinking that the charter, the original charter for the city of Miami, would show if there were any black men involved, and if so, which ones of them could read or write. How many of them wrote their names?
Right.
And so I was able to get a copy of the charter from Mr. Richard Brinker, who was the clerk of the county court at the time. The city didn't have it when I asked for it. Mr. Brinker sent to Tallahassee, got a copy of the charter, and we were just ecstatic to find out that the charter showed that the names were all written by one person. They were written, the description of what was to become Miami, all written in the clerk of the court's handwriting. And each man's name was written, and next to each man's name was his race.
Yes.
And that got us so excited. That really got me excited about archives. And Isidore Cohen's name was on there, as well as A.C. Lightburn.
Yes.
And so that became a part of the archives. Later, I would tell that story, and it became a part of Miami history. It was included in Dunn's book and in all the other books that have been written.
And look at that. Just
Yes.
because someone told you there were no books available
Yes.
for you to share with your children.
Yes.
What is, because that is the definition of stumbling into something that you love. What is another example of one of your favorite stories to come out of that experience? Like, what's your stargazing moment as an archivist?
Well, it's the whole idea of identifying and collecting materials sent me to graduate school to earn a degree, to learn what to do. It's not enough to just want to do it.
Right.
It's important, I feel, to get the training to do what it is that you want to do. And so I was able to go to the program by the Society of American Archivists at Emory to get that information. It's been an exciting process, and 50 years.
Wow.
It was 74.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
So that it has been an exciting time. It's exciting for me to see others come behind me. And you talked about the interior of the lyric. Well, it was Timothy Barber who was in graduate school, and one of my colleagues called me from Tallahassee to say that she had a kid who needed to come home and to finish his internship in archives. He was a history major and wanted to know if I could do something. And I said, well, you know, I created the archives as a volunteer.
Right.
My real job was with the school system for 40 years. And so I didn't have any money. My mother and my uncle were really helping me fund the archives. I had never written a grant, and people thought that I was at the Caleb Center, and they thought that I had a staff. The fact is, my mother would pay someone to be there at the Caleb Center while I was at work. And so I explained all of that to her, and she said, but you've got to get this kid. He's got to come because of family situations, and we don't want him to lose his credits. And so he came and started as an assistant archivist and worked his way up through as the executive director.
Yes, and he was
Yes.
fantastic.
Oh,
Shout out to
absolutely.
Tim Barber, who's now at
The executive director at Florida A&M University.
Yes,
at the archives.
at the archives.
Where he came from.
And we
But-
still keep in touch.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And I said all of that to say that the way that you see the lyric, the interior of the lyric now,
Is largely
credit,
in part, yes.
Well, no, the credit is all to him.
To him.
For his design. And you also see in the center, it says, I'm always saying, until the lions tell their story, Tales of the Hunt will continue to glorify the hunter. And so he used that to focus on the importance of telling stories. And what I'm doing now is encouraging people to write their stories, to tell their stories, to record their stories. AI and AG, as important as they seem to be and are making themselves in our lives, have the opportunity to distort.
Yes.
And that is a concern. And so it's important to have a repository, a place to keep materials, but it's equally important to be able to access them.
Right. So do we have tours here where someone can come and explore the archives?
By appointment, yes, tours can be arranged. When you come to the archives, well, first of all, you should go to the website.
What's the website?
The website, BHLT.com.
Okay, we got that.
Yes. Go to the website and you can contact the archives manager through that. Make an appointment. Understand it's not a library, so
Right.
you will not come and go through materials.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a purpose for coming. Family, individual, organization, whatever, a time period, but you need to have a purpose for coming and a reason for what you're looking for. Those
Some
are-
research.
Yes,
You're probably doing research.
It's research. So we're looking with students, we're working with the independent researchers as well as graduate emerging students. And tomorrow, the trio, Profiles in Black, will in fact, for the naming of the street of Isidore Cohen, will show that doing the research, from research, you can have a mural, you can name a street.
Yes.
And the big thing about Isidore Cohen is that when the incorporators were ready to vote July 28, 1896, there was hesitation, and it was Isidore Cohen. Well, it was actually A.C. Lightburn, who was a black man, a black laborer, who was a member of Greater Bethel AME Church right here in Overtown, who spoke up and said, this is something that we should do, we as a community, we should do. And that was recorded by Cohen, by Isidore Cohen.
Well, Dr. Fields, thank you. You are such a wealth of knowledge. I wish we had more time to talk about so much more, but we're running out of time now. I do want to ask you a couple of questions quickly that I ask all of my guests to inspire our listeners and our viewers. What's your favorite book? Or do you have a favorite book?
My favorite book really was written by Pauli Murray, and it gives the limitations. It gives the limitations of each state, each southern state, as far as blacks were concerned in the 40s and 50s.
Okay.
And it is available. In fact, the University of Miami reprinted it.
Oh, wow.
And it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
But to look at the laws passed by the state legislatures in the 50s, it's recorded by Pauli Murray, and it's worth, especially at this time, looking at.
Okay. Do you have a favorite song or a theme song?
I like them all from the 50s.
Okay. If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you like to break bread with?
Aside from my family, it would be John Hope Franklin. Dr. Franklin, Dean of African American Scholarship, was an advisor to my doctoral program.
Okay.
And came to Overtown and to the Lyric and to the Black Archives whenever I needed him. He came for the opening of the Lyric in 2000. And through his scholarship, of course, we've learned so much as a country, as a nation, as a people.
That would be fantastic.
Dr. John Hope Franklin.
Okay. And if you could give your younger self, your 18-year-old self, some advice, what would you tell yourself?
Don't give up. Don't give up. And get the training that you need. Don't think that because you are who you are, that you don't need training. Too many of our young people don't understand that looking cute and being pretty is not enough, that you really do need to get the training to be in a position that you're in.
That is excellent advice, because we live in such a shallow, superficial world,
Yes.
and people think like, oh, you're pretty, you know, have fancy clothes on, but you got to have something up here.
And use it.
And use it. And use it. Well, thank you, Dr. Fields, for being a guest on the Kingdom Podcast, where all voices are heard. It was a pleasure getting this lesson from you on our history, and I look forward to doing many, many more wonderful things with you, for you, and the Black Archives.
Thank you for the invitation, and Kingdom Podcast, I think, is an excellent name.
Thank you. And that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Kingdom Podcast, where all voices are heard.